in the next minute or two. Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's SICS research seminar. I'm standing in as host as Anita and Jane, who are our normal hosts for these seminars. For different reasons, can't do it. Jane, because she is in Darwin collecting data for her DECRA project, and Anita, because she's our presenter today. And we can't ask our presenter to introduce themselves, although that's one way of guaranteeing a glowing introduction. But I'll give you a glowing introduction anyway, Anita. So I'll begin by acknowledging the Wiradjuri, Ngunnawal, Gundungurra, Biripi peoples of Australia, who are the traditional owners and custodians of the lands on which Charles Sturt's campuses are located, and pay respects to their elders, both past and present. So yes, just a note that we are recording this session and we put all of these seminars up on the school's YouTube channel. It'll be the usual format, I think, Anita. So what, half an hour, 40 minutes, something like that for your presentation, and then plenty of time for questions. If you have questions as we go, what would you like to do, Anita? Do you want people to, do you want to look at the chat as you present, or shall I collate those as we go and then address them at the end?
Either way, that's fine.
Okay, well, if you spot them in the chat, then feel free to answer, but otherwise I'll keep an eye on them and we can deal with them at the end. So today's presentation by Anita is Library Placement as an Enabler for Libraries and Librarians in Building a Sustainable Future. And Anita is a lecturer here in the School of Information and Communication Studies. She has a multidisciplinary background with a PhD in Applied Linguistics, and an MEd from Monash, and a Master of Information Management and Librarianship from Uni SA. And she's currently pursuing her second PhD, which is quite a thing, investigating placement programs in libraries, archives, and record sectors. And her research areas include workplace learning, professional identity, and information literacy. So that's enough from me. I'll hand over to you, Anita.
Thank you, Simon. Thank you for the very kind introduction. And thank you for doing this for me today. I really appreciate it, because I know you have a lot on your plates already. So it's adding one more thing on your plate. I would like to share my screen, but before that, as Simon mentioned, this is what I'm presenting to you. What I'm sharing with you today is actually half of my second PhD that I'm pursuing. So on the librarian side of things, and it's going to be some sort of a rehearsal for my presentation at IFLA. So I'm leaving for IFLA WLIC in a couple of weeks to Rotterdam and present this as a poster. So let's see and check if you can you give me an indication if you can see my second screen? Awesome. Okay. So the title of it is Library Placement as an Enabler for Libraries and Librarians in Building a Sustainable Future. As I mentioned, it's actually half of my current PhD project. In my current PhD project, it covers libraries, archives, but also records management. But for the presentation today and also for IFLA, I'm focusing on libraries and librarians. So I guess the background theory that I'm using in my research in this case is WIL, or Work Integrated Learning, which is the umbrella term for WPL, and particularly placement is the one that I'm focusing on. As you can see here, there are 7 dimensions of WIL, and these are the dimensions that I try to address in my research. Now about placement itself, I'm not going to go through this one by one, but just to give you a snapshot a little bit, then in the context of Australian higher education, universities focus on WIL and preparing students to become work-ready graduates, including us, I guess. And I have the privilege that this session I'm overseeing or coordinating subjects that are very closely to that workplace learning. And of the WIL space, placement is the most prominent and commonly practiced. And apologies if I look away, because my second screen is over there. I'm not looking away from any of you. And placements are applicable to various disciplines, including LIS. Unfortunately, though, it's not yet many researchers doing or investigating that space, because LIS and placements are frequently seen as two different things, and they're not necessarily seen as connected. And that's what I'm trying to do here. So what I'm doing is I'm looking at placement through different lens, if you like, from the students' lens, of course, the universities as the education providers, the host of the industry, and the accrediting body. And I'm going to share with you some findings, particularly in the libraries and librarians side of things today, which I find quite interesting, that they kind of in sync, but not so much in sync across these four perspectives. For my study, I do qualitative method, and I'm sure everyone here knows what qualitative method is, of course, but I suppose it's just to give you a reason why I'm doing it qualitatively, because I want to enable the exploration of factors instead of providing generalization. And here's the thing. So I'm looking at Australian library placement from 2018 to 2022. So before, during, and post-COVID, if you like. And I did my data collection through individual semi-structured interviews. So altogether in the across 4 groups of participants, I have 23 for the libraries aspect of it. The other half is the archives and records is a different story. That's for discussion some other time. So I'd like to start with the university's focus. When I interviewed the university coordinator or workplace coordinator, course directors, course program directors, and so on, of the themes that came up include this: organizing placement, translating theories into practice. And this is actually a phrase that I love so much about. I personally love so much about placement, because that's the essence of it to my understanding. And then connecting with stakeholders, building employability skills, enabling employment, all the good things, right? But also COVID-19 impact. So let me start with the first one. So in terms of organizing placements, there are different types of appointments for placement coordinators. As you know, with the library studies program, there are only 3 universities in Australia that offer that at the moment, at the undergraduate and master's level. I mean, not so much for a library assistant level. And one of them is pretty much, I suppose at CSU I feel like we're quite lucky that we have the support of the WPL team, and subject coordinators hence work closely with course directors, but also the WPL team, and they know what they're doing, I suppose. There's also a university where there's only one person, not teaching, not research, just organizing WPL or placement, but one person overseeing everyone's in the LIS education. And there's another one that is one person overseeing everything, not just LIS, but beyond that, but there is an admin team that supports that. So it's a range of things. The length or the duration is also varied, and the process and strategy and organizing placement also vary across the 3 universities. And as you can see here, I captured the challenges in organizing placement that was revealed in my interview. But everyone agrees that it's about translating theories into practice. So that's the good thing. So everyone is on the same mission. And also connecting with stakeholders is another theme that was brought up. Now, there is a strong emphasis that was mentioned on building employability skills and employment opportunities. So not just employability skills, but also as a bridge to help students or graduates get a job somewhere. So that range from, the host supervisor being referee, but also actually students right after placement getting a job. Yeah, and the way COVID-19 impact was seen is as an unforeseeable external disruption, because it was quite disrupted. I was not here in this role yet when COVID-19 happened. But I noted here that one of the sources or one of the participants suggests that COVID was a massive impact onto placement, And we are still experiencing that. We still see that impact to date, which is true. Now, from the students' perspective, the experience is somewhat similar, but also quite different, because sourcing placement hosts is one thing for them, developing professional skills, building confidence, and so on and so forth, like you can see here on the screen. I'm going to go through that one by one very quickly, because I don't want to take up the time. Sourcing placement hosts. So given the different universities have different approaches in the way placement host is sourced or found across the universities offering LIS, I came across this type of comment from students. The students who were self-seeking for placement host said that it's the hardest thing. But of course, from the educator's perspective, that's probably a good hardest thing, because then that's part of the journey. Seeking for placement site is part of the journey where it's like job seeking almost, which is what we want students to experience as well. And that's, I understand, is the principle that we apply here at CSU. On the other end of the spectrum, I did come across students who say, well, I don't have to worry about that because the university is doing all of that for me. So I just can sit back and relax and then just go to placement. I'm not sure if that's a good thing or not, but I just thought I'd share it with you here. In terms of professional skills, pretty much in line with what the university coordinators suggested. So it's about translating theory into practice and building skills, but not only the practical skills or technical skills, but they also mentioned transferable skills, things like working with other teams in the organization, in the host organizations, and the day-to-day that, there was, yes, so yeah, it's like the last one here. It says, I have learned and to gain some real world experience and to actually feel the atmosphere of being an information management professional. I thought it's kind of cool that students reflect on that way. Confidence, it was mentioned over and over and over again. So confidence, the first main thing was confidence in my own ability. So I think that's what placement has done well to students that I interviewed. It also gives them the feel more comfortable. So confidence to apply for jobs. So apparently when they see it there in the real life world, they say, oh, well, if that person can do the job, I can apply for that job as well. And I am confident that I can do that. And also to be comfortable in the information studies space and to interact professionally, because there was a fear of losing face, being a student, and not quite sure what the professionals do and how they interact with each other. And familiarizing self with sector. I think this has a lot of things to do with the cohort background. So familiarizing with the sector, in terms of this, we have two types of responses that I've got. One is with the glamour industry itself in general, for those who are new to the job market and those who are changing careers. So quite a lot of these students quite a number of these students that I interviewed are actually changing careers from something else that is out of the glamour industry, the galleries, libraries, archives, museums, and records. The glamorous industry, I should say. So it says glamorous industry. And then there we have also a set of response where familiarizing self with the sector, it's with another subsector of the glamour industry as well, because some of these students have already been working in the sector. So as you can see here, I'm not going to read through this, but these are the sort of responses that I've received. And of course, securing employment. I've got the job. I secured a job. So that, again, from adding details and resume, a line in the resume that I've done placement, hence then you become more confident in applying for a job, to getting foot in the door and actually securing a more permanent job in the industry. And making up their own mind about which career path to take. And not necessarily that, oh yes, after I go do my placement, then this is what I want to pursue. Some of them say, oh no, now I realize after placement, this is not something that I want to do. So it works the other way around as well. Like the GT here, the last one, so there were more jobs in academic library that we were taught. So she did a placement in an academic library, and she actually secured a job in an academic library, but she said, I learned that I did not want to work in collections. So that's something that, you know, that they did not know what they did not know, obviously. So this came up across after placement. But also I want to share with you some that there was an unwanted experience. So I guess just in my very limited time of overseeing or coordinating workplace learning subjects, I come across a few questions about internal placements or RPLs. Yeah, but I guess we should never assume that internal placement or RPL is always a preference. I did have one of the participants that actually signed up, enrolled in Masters of Information Studies, Information Management, to be able to go out there and do placement in an amazing place, already working in the sector, but then the employer just said, no, you can't go out there. You do internal placement. She was so unpleased about that, so unsatisfied, so disappointed. And on top of that, there are multiple cases happening in there. And for this person, for example, the supervisor, the host supervisor, got sick after day number 3. So she was left alone, and there was no check-in from the academic coordinator or the university coordinator. So that was just not a good experience at all. She did learn something about it, to be independent and take initiative, as mentioned to me, but this was not a pleasant experience. And often when we talk about placement challenges, what I come across with, particularly with the university providers, placement challenges, then right like that, you go back to COVID, right? This is the impact of COVID. But it turns out that from the students' experiences, it's not always the case. There are other factors as well, including external factors from technical, access, simple as limited access to system, up to program design issues. So it's not always about COVID, although COVID is a barrier, it's a challenge. For GT, for example, some learning becomes irrelevant and limited knowledge of, and what happens is she's got limited knowledge of practices or services prior to COVID-19 pandemic. So she did her placement during COVID. She said it was a really eerie experience. There was no students on site. As I mentioned before, she did her placement in an academic library. And she did say here, I don't have an image of what libraries were like. The move towards digital resources, open educational resources. This is all that I know. So no idea how, it used to be students lining up to get help over the desk and that sort of thing. So 2 perspectives of now the hosts. What are their concerns about? A few aspects here. As you can see, the way placement is organized, timing issues, it came up quite a number of times, and then the benefits and opportunity to investigate potential employees, I guess, take a sneak peek of opportunity to get a new worker, and impact of COVID-19 again, and online environment. The way placement is organized on the end of the host supervisors is that they're being given the work. Most of them, it's not part of their job, but they're just being given the work. There is the idea of economies of scale. So taking on 7 students and 1 student is the same organizing activities. So just economies of scale. Why don't we do multiple at one time? Although I have to say that's not necessarily Again, it's not about generalization, but I want to reveal that here, share it with you here, that what I found. And resourcing capacity. So for point 2, for example, I'll suggest that the placement that I was involved with last year kind of came to us because nobody else knew what to do. So, it's just a matter of accidents happen, okay, someone has to pick this up, so I'll pick up the work. And I think one of the comments that was interesting for us, particularly in the academic or in the university side of a story, is that one of the placement supervisor said the library information schools, I don't think, realize the amount of work that goes into place to organize placements. Timing issues, as I mentioned before, is also brought up several times. So it includes the duration, the timing, but also that empathetic comment on financial impact for students. I thought this was quite interesting, so that, it's a little bit of solidarity that I guess JS, for example, said that it's hard for people to volunteer their time and not earn money for a couple of weeks. And there's a lot of assumption on their end. When I followed up with the interview, I thought one of the comments from placement supervisors that I don't put up here was, oh, if only things can be more flexible. And I asked, well, how do you mean by flexible? Well, if it doesn't have to be in a block of 2 weeks, what if it can be stretched across, and I thought, we're already doing that. So, I guess that's where I stumbled across there needs to be more communication across the different stakeholders, because assumption is not really, it's really, we shouldn't really assume in any of the 4 parts of this interaction. And benefit for stakeholders. So I asked them about benefits for students or host organizations, host supervisors, and accrediting body. It's really interesting that the host supervisors took time when I asked about your benefits for you as a host supervisor. So, I never thought of it that way, that it brings benefit to me, although some of them then give response after that in different ways. But when it comes to benefits for ALIA, I think this one is quite interesting, where I think for ALIA, it's a way of keeping their fingers in the pie all the time. And the pies change in terms of the context of libraries and students coming up. So I think that's kind of an interesting perspective as well. And it doesn't stop by the end of placement. Turns out that there are post-placements activities and interactions that keep going. And also for host supervisors / host institutions, it's actually seen as an opportunity to investigate potential employees. So it's a bit like try before you buy. And then when opportunities come up, apply. Oh yeah, I got that person. I've seen how they work, for example. And as I mentioned before, online environment, it's not only because of COVID, but it's the constraint is mostly with unfamiliarity with the system, limited access, because students who come on placement, they're not employees. So there are a few barriers there, which result in missing experience in certain services. But again, as I mentioned, it's not always about COVID. COVID itself, the impact, according to the host supervisors, is more on the blended working environment. And I've come across this several times. This session, for example, where students go out there for placement, and the work environment is actually a hybrid, where people come into work 3 days a week and work from home 2 days a week. So that's a big change. It's such a different organization compared to before. Okay, this is the final perspective from accrediting body's attention, as you can guess, because I'm looking at libraries. So this is from ALIA's perspective. Standardizing. is one of them. So the idea is to have standard practice, make sure that supervisors are either associate membership, have associate membership, or eligible for associate membership. And there is a mechanism of reporting back. So consistent and standardized placements, and confident that all stakeholders support placements. This is from the ALIA's perspective, which I thought was quite interesting when I interview placement supervisors. They say, "Oh, staffing is tough. You know, we need to think about it a bit more carefully," and so on. And a few benefits and challenges that was brought up by the ALIA as well. So in brief, I know I don't want to take time too much because I want to talk to you more and I want to seek your feedback as well. There is not necessarily an alignment across the four perspectives. So it would be good if an alignment of the four shared stakeholders' views in the form of a best practice can happen, or can it can be the outcome, which will lead to sustainable libraries and librarians, both in the industry, both the school that produce new graduates, but also for the students coming out into the industry as well. But with a note that this best practice, although a best practice was mentioned by Alia in the interview, but this best practice should not be, in my perspective, should not be constant in nature. It can't stay the same. Rather, it needs to be one that is continuously revisited, reviewed, and revised. And that can only be done through communication between the stakeholders, not one deciding on a best practice for everyone. Okay. I hope that gives you a bit of a snapshot of what I'm working on. Thank you.
Thanks, Anita. Really interesting. Yeah, great work. Is it easier second time round through your PhD? You know the.
I knew I will get that kind of question, particularly from you, Simon.
No, I'm in awe of it.
Different journey.
Yes, very good. So any questions? I didn't spot anything in the chat, I don't think, but anyone have any questions for Anita?
I'll go first.
Go for it.
So I guess from your perspective, any surprises in your research so far that you've seen? Anything that was unexpected or expected?
Yeah, because particularly from the students' point of view, because particularly with that internal placement RPL thing, that's that one student we had an hour-long conversation, which was a bit longer than the rest, because normally it takes 30 to 45 minutes for each interviewee. That it really is not our place to assume to assume that students always want the easy way. In fact, that particular students actually sign up and enroll in the master's program, so that this is a career changer, by the way, so that they can go out there to do placement. And she did get accepted to do placement in several places, like the National Gallery, National Library of Australia. So it was so disappointing for her that yeah, but from my perspective, that's one of the things that surprised me, because I thought, if you ask me, probably if I'm a student and I've got that heaps of experience, I would probably say, oh, why don't I just get an RPL? It's easy done, right? But not this particular student. So that's one of the things. Yeah. And not surprising, but I was not expecting such a straightforward answer, I suppose, when they say standardized practice from the I'm not surprised by that of course, as an accrediting body, you would want a standardized practice across the board. But I guess from my perspective, all universities have their own flavors. I've only had worked in 3 different universities, and they're all already different flavors, if you like. So I'm not quite sure if standardizing as such is at all possible. Yeah. Thanks for the question though, Katie. I thought I could get away with half an hour.
Thanks, Katie. Any other questions? Yazdan, I noticed you come on.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Anita, for this informative presentation. So, as you know, I have been subject coordinator for WPL during the past session. And then when I was reading students' report for their workplace learning, I realized that their lived experience is very important. We usually focus on the skills they are going to learn, you know, how to translate the theory to practice and how they can put theory into practice, which is, of course, important. But I think equally important is the lived experience they have in new contexts. So from a phenomenological point of view, because your research is qualitative, I don't know to what extent you look at this lived experience just to be there, to be in a workplace. So I'm just wondering to what extent you looked at it from this phenomenological perspective.
Yeah, as I think one of the slides also, I have a line on that where student mentioned that, you know, that comfort of being in the information professional zone or atmosphere.
Yeah.
Yes, that's part of that's one of the aspects that I investigated as well, Yazdan, and closely related to confidence. Was brought up so many times, particularly with the students, not so much with the other three stakeholders. And I have to say that from the host supervisors, they don't see that either. As the university providers as well, the education providers, we often focus on the translating theories into practice.
Yes.
The host supervisors also did not see that. They're more concerned about, okay, how can you build skills? What's your project? That sort of thing. But confidence was actually one of the main theme that came up amongst the students.
Excellent.
Yeah. See, that's why I think communicating that across the four stakeholders, past placement students, having a chat with universities, with host supervisors, and with ALIA in this case, for example, would be very good, because then if that's what they experience, and that's good for them, because when they're confident, they can then feel like, okay, now I can apply for that job because that person, I can do their work. And I know now what to do if I'm working in this space. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you. Look, any feedback, anything, if you feel like, Anita, your presentation sucks, so you should change it this way or that way next time. And if not, let me know, because it's a rehearsal as well, as I said before.
No, it was very good. Are there any other questions? I did have a question. Also, a slight admission, I had to answer a couple of super urgent emails, so I missed a few minutes, and it would be typical if you covered this in the few minutes I missed, which is why I mention it. Not having worked particularly in the WPL space, I do get a strong impression that it can be very challenging to supervise, to run these subjects and work with students. There's a lot of moving parts. Every student, you know, rightly sees their placement as extremely important and expects the subject coordinator or the WPL team to be working really closely with them to support them through the process and help them find sites and so on. I'm just wondering, you know, as you were talking to the various different parts, did that sort of administrative burden come through? Were there any sort of discussions around challenges, workload implications? I don't know, what it means for even the well-being of staff who are in these roles, which are quite stressful, and dealing with students who are in stressful positions as well. Yeah.
Look, my answer would be on two prongs here. So the host supervisors, definitely, as I have one slide on that, it takes a lot of time.
Mm.
And for some of them, it's just been given to them. Almost, it's not part of their job description. So just because you've done it before, or you're interested in it, or your manager say you do it, or no one else pick up, so you have to pick that up, and in the industry side. And that's, of course, that's an extra managing for them. So it is a burden for them, although most of them say, yeah, I'll still do it because I like doing it. And I know that this is a means of me giving back to the profession and to the community and the younger generation of librarians. But from the and the fact that it's an individual experience, I should say, that also brought up the flavor, because quite a few of them say, oh yeah, we had beautiful students, excellent students, but one in the history of my supervision, there's one that was quite an issue. Yeah. The other side of the story is from the academic side of it. So I can share my own experience, if I may. It's very limited, of course, because this is the first session I'm overseeing this, but you can already say that it's a very individual experience for students. And as you said, Simon, every single one of them thinks that my placement is the most important thing in the world. So yes, it's quite a lot of emailing back and forth, and that I experience is the difference between the subjects that I oversee or I coordinated last session, for example, where I could make the and I did make discussion forum alive. You can make that discussion very, very lively, but with workplace learning, because of the context is different for each of the students, they prefer to contact me, either calling me or emailing me, and that is a time management, or I suppose work mode management in itself. The coordinators that I interviewed in the two other universities, obviously, at CSU, we know we have subject coordinators, but we also have the WPL team. The other two, they're on their own basically. So they're not teaching, they're not researching, but I would imagine this is a very constant pace every single day, back and forth emailing. And the fact that they organize placement placement sites for the students, that already says a lot, I reckon.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Excellent. May I add something as a comment, basically, because if I was here last year, my understanding about your presentation would be totally different, because I had a chance to be coordinator for past session, and I learned a lot. So I have a lived experience now. I didn't have that last year. So now I can share my understanding with everyone here. When I reflect on this experience, because you mentioned the stakeholders, I think this is a win-win situation for all the stakeholders, because of course we focus on students learning, but it's learning process for supervisors across the GLAM sectors. Many of them never had a chance to be a mentor. So it's just, of course, they might be reluctant to accept this responsibility, because this is something above their work, and this is a new responsibility, and they are very busy. It's understandable. It doesn't matter where you work across the GLAM sector, you usually are very busy. And then when someone comes and say, okay, can you be my supervisor, being volunteer to be supervisor, so it might be a challenge, but it's a very rewarding challenge for everyone. So what I'm trying to explain here is just the significance of workplace learning, not just for a student, for all the stakeholders, because this is a bridge between theory and practice, and we all learn. It's a peer learning, it's a collaborative learning. So and of course reflective learning as well, because at the end of workplace learning, supervisors should fill out the form and reflect on the experience. So it's good to look at it from this perspective. I'm sure you have already done that. Look at it as a collaborative learning, you know, and reflective learning, and highlight the significance of collaboration and reflection in this process.
Yeah,
it was just a comment, no question.
thank you, Yasdan. As I mentioned before, it took them a couple of seconds to respond when I asked, what's the benefit of is there any benefit of placement for you? When I asked the host supervisor, it took them a couple of seconds before they answered. But the response that I got was pretty much in line with you. I'm just reading one of them. For example, it says, sometimes when you're working in a sector for so long and you see a certain thing and you develop a certain mindset of how you should operate. And when you get a fresh set of eyes come in who has no previous relationship with the organization, that can actually see things through a very clear lens. So,
well done,
you know, so that kind of reflection, but I get that they never, well, not never, but, you know, they didn't come naturally for them to reflect on the experience that way. It's the benefit for students. Benefits for the host organizations that always come to mind to them. Because when I said, what's the benefit for your organization? Bang, right there, they answer it. Benefit for students, that's very quick. But when I ask, what's the benefit for you? So,
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because some organizations are a bit reluctant to accept. Of course, I'm not judging them. They have their own mission and vision. They have their own responsibility. But in a larger, in a bigger picture, because the first question is, why should I spend time and energy of my staff to supervise a student? But when you look at it a bit deeper, then they realize this is a win-win situation. It's not a favor to university or a student. They will gain something because they are investing. It's a kind of a learning experience for their staff as well. Of course, the students will contribute in their work. They are not as skillful as their staff, but they are learning and contributing at the same time. They are working for 10 days, 70 hours, which is a significant, remarkable amount of time. So yeah, that's amazing. And then now you have empirical evidence about my assumption, so prove that. And that's really good, focusing on it. And I think there are room for improvement to make workplace learning more joyful and more pleasant for everyone. You know, and I'm sure this is something that will be one of the contribution of your PhD. And good luck with that. And very well done. Thank you.
Thank you, Yasdan. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Anita. Any final questions? All right. Well, thanks, Anita. Thanks, everyone, for coming along. Do we know who's doing next month, Anita? Sorry,
we do, but we will send out the invite.
Well, see, is this a secret special guest?
Keep it mystery.
Okay, it's not me, is it? I didn't know. Maybe I'm later. I should know. Anyway, okay. Thanks, everyone. So I'll stop recording.